Good evening and welcome. I'm Ritu Sethi, Director, League of Artisans. Established in 2022, the League of Artisans, a not-for-profit, works alongside artisans to give voice for a more dignified future for people and planet. As a new organization, albeit with longitudinal experiences of the founders and of our global advisors, our core methodology is collaborative. Responding to global challenges by mobilizing the power of co-creation, building networks, and the amplification of artisans' voices, we advocate for the transformational power of collective knowledge to bring wider and deeper impacts to larger numbers, thereby providing a vital response to transforming futures. So on behalf of my co-directors, Saul Marinucci and Carrie Sommers, and our Artisan Advisory Board, I welcome you all to our 6th webinar that is a run-up to the first ever Leek Textile Week to be held in Leek, timed right around the corner from 23rd to 29th September. The webinar today is titled Manifestos for Change in the Arts, Crafts, and Fashion. So what is it about manifestos that draw our attention? While the most well-known in the wider world are political, and what comes to mind immediately to most of us is the Communist Manifesto, written by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels in 1848. In the arts, crafts, and cultural sphere, valuable work has impacted many over time. In fact, from the very region where League of Artisans is headquartered, we have the Manifesto of the Society for the Protection of Ancient Buildings, written by William Morris, Philip Webb, and others in 1877. The SPAB Manifesto was a response to harmful restoration by architects in the late 19th century that was causing irreparable damage to heritage structures. The guiding principle of the manifesto extended to all manners of building, and I quote, for all times and all styles of architecture. The power of this manifesto lies in not just what it achieved in its time, but its farsightedness and its applications almost 150 years later to us in 2024. But today, we will hear about other manifestos written in our century, with principles that I think will hold good for times to come. The speakers on our panel today examine the motivation of the work they represent, the issues they address, the purpose of their call to the wider public, and their impacts, both intended and unintended, in bringing about change. But before I hand over to them, just a bit of admin. First, thank you for responding to the online poll that we posted at the start. Please do post your questions to the panelists in the Q&A link below. And if you would like a specific speaker to respond, do specify who you're addressing the question to. Also, if you have comments and suggestions, please add them to the chat box, in which you will note we have added some useful links, including those to the over 55 events lined up with the Leek Textile Week. So please do check and reserve your seats. And now on to the main part of the program. And it is my pleasure to introduce Sarah Corbett. Sarah is an award-winning activist, author, and Ashoka Fellow. She set up Craftivist Collective in 2009 after demand from people around the world to take part in her craftivism that she started doing in 2008. Sarah grew up in Everton, the 4th most deprived ward in the UK, into an activist family, and has worked as a professional campaigner for over 2 decades, most recently with Oxfam GB. And she provides Craftivism, which stands for Craft Plus Activism, products and services for individual groups and organizations globally to use her gentle protest methodology. which has helped change hearts, minds, business policy, and government laws around the world. She has worked with the UK's national charities such as the Climate Coalition, Mind, Save the Children, Arts Institution, including Tate, V&A, and unusual allies, including Secret Cinema, Helsinki Design Week, and Makers Fair USA. Her TEDx talk, titled Activism Needs Introverts, has been viewed over 1 million times and was chosen as TED Talk of the Day. She is an author, and her publications are titled How to Be a Craftivist, The Art of Gentle Protest, and the Craftivist Collective Handbook, published in 2024. The title of her talk is How to Be a Craftivist in the Art of Gentle Protest. So over to you, Sarah.
Thanks so much for having me. Right, I'm going to get straight to it with my presentation for people. We've got some slides that will be sent to you on PDF if you want it as well. So if we can put them up, that would be great. And I've given myself a little timer. So if you hear an alarm go off, that's me telling myself to shut up so you can hear the other speakers. I don't know if you can see the slides, but hopefully they'll come up in a minute. Here we go. Brilliant. Yes. So the first slide is showing you my manifesto. So I was doing craftivism in 2009, 2008, and for a number of years I did it without a manifesto, because I was figuring out where I thought craft could be most useful in activism. As you've heard, my background is activism and my passion is activism, and craft should be the tool, not the taskmaster. And because I didn't coin the word craftivism, I felt it was really important to create our own manifesto to say, here are our values, here are our tactics, here is our methodology. And it is often used by national and international campaign charities as a checklist for them to use for some of their own campaigns. So I found it incredibly useful. You can see on the image of me later, I've got it next to me as a printout, and you can download it free from the website in more languages than you can see there. I'm adding to that. The next slide is me. If you look at the tiny little person on the right, the little child, that's me in my local community, campaigning with our local community of people of all faiths and none to save the housing that we're standing in front of. So we squatted, we sat in them, we got, as a community, my parents were heavily involved. And I knew from a very early age that to win a campaign, whether it's to save these local housing that we did win, needed lots of strategy. So as part of this successful campaign, we got free legal advice. We got lots of media attention. This is from our local newspaper. We got bishops involved. We got people of all faiths and none. And we knew which power holders and which decision makers we had to campaign to so that the houses were saved. And that was really good learning for me to then become an activist as a teenager and to become a professional campaigner for the likes of Oxfam and other charities. My craftivism happened all by accident, but I saw that craft could help in lots of ways in my activism. And the next slide is just a good summary of saying that while I was, if you click to the next slide, while I was doing craftivism and I was testing things out, what I realized that was most useful in my craftivism was the gentleness. So for me, craftivism, lots of people do craftivism in lots of different ways, which is why we have a manifesto to differentiate what we do. And so people can carry on what they're doing, but just to make it clear what we do. But for me, the gentleness was really important. It wasn't just the fact that we were hand embroidering. It was the fact that everything we did was thoughtful, was compassionate, not only to the people directly affected by the issues we were campaigning on, but also to ourselves, so we didn't burn out as activists, and compassionate to the decision makers and power holders, whether they're politicians or business leaders, that we were compassionate to them. It's also the gentleness in terms of it being strategic, so emotionally intelligent, thoughtfully done, not reactive, and uses sustainable resources as well as it being sustainable for our own health. So it was always about protest, but it was always about doing loving, gentle activism. That's where I think the strength is in the craftivism that the Craftivist Collective does. Now, I'm going to run through 3 ways that craft is, I think, from my experience over nearly 2 decades or more, of where craft can be most useful. And the first, next slide, is the power in the process of using hand embroidery. So I love this quote by Aristotle, which is, anybody can become angry. That's easy. But to be angry with the right people at the right time, at the right degree, at the right time, and for the right purpose, in the right way, it's not easy. So you can do craftivism in a very easy way where you use your embroidery, you use your craft to just scream and shout at people, to express how you feel, to be very hurtful, to be very ungentle, to be thoughtless, to be unstrategic. And what I find really useful of having the manifesto is to say to people, if you want to be a gentle craftivist, if you want to join the Craftivist Collective and take part in our projects and our events and use our methodology, it's really important that it's proactive, not reactive. It's emotionally intelligent. It's strategic. So the next slide shows 2 different ways of people crafting. Next slide, please. So you can do it on your own. Sorry, the previous slide where you can see people crafting on their own or in a group. So you can do craftivism where you're making things whilst watching the TV or talking to your friends about your to-do list or a bit of gossip. But it's really important, I think, in craftivism to use the process for critical thinking and mindfulness. So for anyone that does hand embroidery or paper craft, I do mostly hand embroidery where you don't have to count crochet or knitting, you use back stitch or cross stitch. By doing the repetitive hand action, it naturally calms you down, slows you down. So it's a really useful tool for being mindful of what we're bringing to our activism. Are we stressed or tired or angry or sad? Are we making presumptions? Are we being that angry, reactive person? And the craft process, I tell people the first point on the manifesto says, be the tortoise. I tell people to slow down and use the craft for critical thinking and not just make lots of things to put out in the world that could end up in a landfill and might not actually make real change. So the manifesto talks about how it's making sure the craft is a tool for critical thinking about what is my plan with this object. Is it to give a gift to a power holder? Is it street art? Is it just a chance for me as part of a group to discuss big complex questions that we call craft thought questions, like what is the issue we care about? What are the solutions to that issue? And where can I be of best use as a campaigner? Is it as a constituent with a politician? Is it as a consumer? Is it as an employer? Is it as a union rep? Activism is complex and needs thoughtful strategies. So I really push with our manifesto for people to use it for critical thinking and mindfulness. And that's what the power of the process of using the process to really think through issues is really important. And just the next slide shows quickly a project that I did. So I did with the Climate Coalition, which was a national project in the UK, but you can also find it in our book. Next slide, please. Just to pick up on the next slide. Yeah, on that one is you can make lots of green hearts to wear on your sleeve about climate change, issues that are affected by climate change, so objects that you love. But again, for us, the manifesto is really clear to be strategic. So you've got Kizzy Wardle, who's in the orange jumper on this collage page from my current book, who used the process of making her green heart that said Walthamstow, which is a constituency that she was the politician that represented that constituency. And while she was making her badge, she was thinking about how can I use this in the most effective way? And she uses her badge on her sleeve. So every political meeting she's in, whether it's with the public or whether it's with her colleagues, she always wears her green heart on her sleeve, saying the location that she represents. And when people say, why are you wearing that? And why is it handmade? She can say, every meeting we have to think about the impact on the planet and on global warming. So it's a good reminder for her and a reminder for her colleagues and for the public to see that global warming should always be as part of the agenda for whatever campaigns or whatever political decisions that she makes. The next slide, I'm running through so I don't run out of time. It's about the power in the product. So often we use craftivism to give a gift for people. So the next slide shows, when I say shows handkerchiefs. So we make handkerchiefs for politicians. And again, you have to think through the strategy very carefully. So we make sure it's non-violent language. It's a timeless message to say, don't blow it. Use your power for good. We know you've got a really difficult job, but a really important job. And we want to hold you account and encourage you to help people and planet and mitigate as much harm as possible. And you can see on this image, they take hours to make. So for the craftivist, it gives you time to really empathize with the power holder and the struggles they might be going through, as well as those directly by injustice that you care about, and to show that power holder that you really do care about them doing a good job. And they're not used to getting handmade, bespoke gifts that are not perfect, that are handmade. It's very memorable. It sticks in with the psychology and the neuroscience behind it. Says it's very memorable to build a relationship with power holders. But again, you have to think through what colors you use, what fonts you use, what language you use. And the manifesto is a really good checklist where it says things like provoke, don't preach. So make sure you're not naming and shaming the power holder, because they'll not want to keep their handkerchief. It says, empathy never points the finger. So don't be cruel in your messaging. It says it's about solidarity, not sympathy. So don't be trying to be the hero to people that that are going through injustice. Try and be alongside them. And there is, because I'm based in the UK and I work a lot with British and American and more Western societies where people aren't directly affected by injustice, I make sure that solidarity, not sympathy, is always reminded and embedded in people's craftivism so that we aren't led by ego. The next slide just shows some of the handkerchiefs that we've made for politicians. And you can find online how when we made handkerchiefs for the board members of Marks and Spencer's, it directly led to them paying the living wage to 50,000 staff. Now, it was a very complex campaign, so you can find more online about that. Next slide is about the power in the public sphere. So there's power in making your craftivism. There's power in giving your craftivism gift to a power holder to build a relationship with them as a critical friend rather than as an aggressive enemy, and as a form of intimate activism. But there's also power in doing bits of street art, street craftivism, I call it. The next slide shows some examples. And with that, it needs to be just as strategic as all of the others. So on our manifesto, we have a point about it being small and beautiful, not big and brash. So you can see on here, we have a Lego protest outside the House of Commons, Westminster in the UK. And it's a very good image that people use all over the world on social media, in books. And it's a good way that if you're in a country or a place where it's risky to do politics and to do activism, it's a safer way for you to get involved and get some really useful images that can help people think about an issue you care about and find out more information. We have a message outside of barbers. So where men get their hair cut. And it's about getting them to think about how to make sure that women are protected, women feel safe, and to challenge themselves if they're being predators in any way. And the last two images at the bottom are to support Fashion Revolution, who I know someone's going to speak about that, about their manifesto. And this was about shop dropping little mini scrolls you can see with messages about who made this item of clothing. Is it one of joy? Is it one of pain? Find out more at Fashion Revolution. And we would put them in pockets of clothes, like you can see on the image in the bottom right-hand corner, anonymously, and we'd put them in fast fashion stores where customers and potential buyers would find that object, open it up with the beautiful ribbon that they see, and it doesn't scream at them, it just asks them to be curious, which I made sure that Fashion Revolution staff signed off the project, so it was in line with their manifesto. But we got that project on the homepage of BBC News website, we got it on the Business of Fashion website, which you'll know is very influential, and we get it in media all over the world quite regularly at fashion weeks. And it's a very good example. The handkerchiefs are about intimate activism with power holders. The mini fashion statements are about creating conversation and thought with the general public. But all of them fit in with our 10-point manifesto to make sure it's strategic, it's loving, it's aware of sustainability of the resources we use. And just ending on the last slide, which is back to the manifesto that you can see. If you click on that one. So you can see it there. It's currently hanging in the Design Museum in Denmark, in Copenhagen, and will be until December. And we have architects and designers and people all over the world who go to that exhibition. And it's the biggest thing in our area because we have all of these small bits of craftivism. Because it's the most important thing for our craftivism is the manifesto, for people to understand the strategy and to agree or disagree with the values to take part. So it is the biggest object in the exhibition, and it is something that we've had designers say that they've used and implemented in their own work. And WWF, which is the World Wild, I can never say it, the World Wild Wildlife Federation actually used our 10-point manifesto to create their own campaign in Spain to protect migrating birds, and they won. So it did end up leading to a change in the law in Spain to help with the environment and protect those migrating birds. So I think it's it's the most important tool in my toolkit as a craftivist, and I hope you might want to download it and use it for free as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. That was very, Emma, remove the slide, please. That was very inspiring. Really remarkable work. Many congratulations.
Thank you so much. I hope it's useful.
Yeah, definitely. Our next speaker is Leandra van Staden. Liandra is a trained textile designer with a passion for weaving and printmaking. She began her career at one of Africa's largest fashion and homeware retailers and became aware of the significant negative impacts of the fashion and textile industry. This fueled her commitment to being part of the movement to reimagine and transform the sector. Liandra shifted her focus to creative education as a tool for change. She believes education can empower individuals and challenge the conventional behavior of societies that often neglect their most vulnerable members. In her work, she has developed a deep appreciation for designing learning experiences that inspire change through creative problem solving. In 2018, Liandra joined the social movement organization Fashion Revolution, where she currently serves as the co-country coordinator for the South African team. She furthered her expertise by completing a postgraduate diploma in sustainable development at the University of Stellenbosch in 2020, exploring topics relating to planning for a just and equitable future in South Africa, Africa, and beyond. The title of her talk is Manifesto for a Fashion Revolution. Over to you, Liandra.
Thank you so much, everybody. And thank you so much, Sarah. That was really wonderful. It's a hard act to follow. Let me quickly share my my screen with you all. All right. Let me just minimize everybody. There we go. So welcome to everyone, and thank you for offering myself and the Fashion Revolution team the opportunity to share. It's been really incredible to watch the webinar series, and to actually participate has been really special. I'm going to start with a very quick introduction to Fashion Revolution so that you are all familiar with the framework. And then I'm going to move on to speaking to some of the points around what we've seen in our local context. So please keep in mind that this is very much from the South African team's perspective. So Fashion Revolution is a global movement that emerged in response to the Rana Plaza factory collapse in Bangladesh in 2013. So we have been around for over a decade. And unfortunately, there were over 1,100 garment workers who died due to this factory collapse. This tragedy really exposed the unsafe working conditions and exploitation that often define the fashion supply chain. And as such, Fashion Revolution was born as a social activism group that really advocates for a clean, safe and fair, transparent and accountable fashion industry. We really want to consider people and the environment with respect to the specificities of our various regions. So we have a global network, which constitutes of over 80 countries. We really aim to do this by mobilizing citizens, as well as brands, policymakers through research, education, and advocacy. So as you can imagine, that requires a really robust manifesto. Not only is this a public declaration of our principles and goals and our intentions, but it outlines the core values of the movement, calling for change and action. In Fashion Revolution, the manifesto really serves as a guiding document, rallying our supporters, influencing policy, and laying the groundwork for long-term transformation. I will share this with all of you in detail so that you can work through it. I'm going to just really approach this from a very high level as we have limited time. And I love to share some of the projects that we have contributed to locally. So really, the manifesto's intention is to set a vision for a really fair fashion industry. It envisions a world where fashion is produced and consumed in an ethical, sustainable, and transparent manner. It advocates for respect for people, the environment, and that is throughout the entire fashion supply chain, rather than just being kind of one segment of our very complex supply chain, which is very much globally interwoven. And then, of course, we want to drive collective action. The manifesto is rallying a cry for both individuals, brands, policymakers. It's designed to really encourage people to ask who made my clothes, which is a campaign that many people here will be familiar with. And we really want to hold brands accountable for their production practices. The vision really is that if we're not all participating, we won't see the change that we really seek to see in the world. And then again, we want to influence industry and policy. The manifesto presents actionable demands, from reducing environmental impacts to ensuring fair wages for garment workers. It aims to influence not only individual behaviors, but corporate practices, as well as government policies to create systemic change. So it's really a dynamic sort of approach to holistically looking at the fashion industry and everything that it affects. In terms of how we see this working as a team, is that the manifesto really aims to provide us with a roadmap for reimagining the industry globally. And it also allows us to unite as a global network where we have teams represented all over the world with a really clear vision so that we can speak with a united voice. We want to seek social change. We want to see it in consumers. We want to see it in industry and in corporate spaces. But we all need to be quite consistent and cognizant of our local context, which I'll speak to in future slides. We also find that it is specifically meaningful for us for the manifesto to be inspirational, encouraging mobilization and support of our campaigns. As I've mentioned, it's also quite inclusive in terms of being considerate of all aspects of protecting the people and planet. And I think it can't be understated that it's really important that our manifesto establishes a really strong identity that is recognized globally because we are represented so widely. And then I really love this idea of thinking global and acting local. And I think in this context, it's incredibly important because the manifesto creates an understanding of our global context, but it's open enough for us to be agile, to consider our local context across diverse regions, whilst taking local and specific steps to address issues in our own communities. It also empathizes the connection between our local actions and global outcomes. What we're seeking to achieve is meaningful global change, which starts with small initiatives at the local level, and really in a region such as Africa to offer possible insights and support to our global network teams so we can often share learnings that everyone can benefit from. So in terms of on the screen here, you see the areas of our work across the board. So we really look at fashion activism, educational activities, policy and industry advocacy, and reflecting on these impacts of the manifesto as a roadmap for change. We've noticed both predictable and unpredictable outcomes. There have been significant traction in our local teams in terms of fashion activism and education on the continent, but we have found policy and industry advocacy to remain areas that we have yet to fully penetrate. We find that because we're a volunteer-based organization, that capacity in terms of our extent of influence is a limiting factor at times. We find that there's a lot of traction noted specifically within the Fashion Revolution month, with teams such as South Africa becoming country offices. We really hope that we can continue to grow a consistent footprint and be an active participant in our ecosystem, and with that start building relationships with local governments and industry partners. So in terms of the seen and the unforeseen, we really wish to encourage the consumption of locally produced fashion that celebrates heritage, craft and artisanal practice, simply because there is so much that we can celebrate locally. But what we do find in collaboration with designers is that although they're very motivated to participate and also seek to have an ethical fashion ecosystem, that we have very significant barriers to change. The majority of designers are really dependent on the import of fabrics, as the local textile production sector has become quite suppressed and broken down over time due to geopolitical complexities. This has kind of led to a downturn in specialized skills and facilities in the textile sector. Further, although raw materials such as cotton can be produced locally, the remaining steps of the production is done off of the continent and then has to be brought back, which generally comes at quite an increased cost point. So that does pose designers with a challenge. In terms of traceability of fabrics available locally, given that it needs to be imported, can be particularly difficult for them. And then if we speak about certified and traceable fabrics, these are far more expensive, which leads to higher cost to consumers. Perhaps just for some context, and I hate to be negative, and I promise I'll move on to some of our wins and dreams, but for everyone to understand the landscape, within the South African context specifically, there's an unemployment rate of about 33.5%. That was noted in the second quarter of 2024. So the cost to consumer is a really valid concern, and that we hope that the growth of the sector can offer opportunities of employment. But of course, this needs to be really carefully considered to ensure that the establishment of a strong textile sector is within the framework set by the Fashion Revolution Manifesto. We also have an extremely divided kind of inequality of income within our local sphere, which does mean that a lot of ethical purchasing behavior remains quite privileged to what is said by kind of local stats tracking to be about 3% of our consumer base that's really participating in purchasing and having a disposable income. We've also noticed that behavior change is significantly impaired with the rise of ultra fashion brands who have found loopholes in the very stringent rules around imports of textile and fashion products, which otherwise protects our local market quite significantly. But with the rise of conversations around ethical and sustainable fashion, we've also seen that there is a lot of greenwashing and misinformation, which really leads me to my next point in terms of the things that we've seen to be very successful. And I'm going to share some images with you now. I'm sorry, I got a little bit stuck there. We have really found that the education, not just formally, this is from 2019, this is a textile workshop we ran with some fashion students in the days of masks, is that our work reaches really effectively across both the formal education space with masterclasses and workshops for emerging and established designers, as well as within tertiary fashion education. But beyond that, we also offer workshops offering skills training and support to social benefit organizations that are working within similar spaces and can really benefit from the knowledge of the manifesto. As I've mentioned previously, events and activations for consumers can be very powerful in terms of creating an understanding of the social and environmental issues. But also inform purchasing decisions in terms of recognition of better quality fabrics and garments and how to care and repair for these to ensure longevity, regardless of the price point. We want to be really sensitive to the fact that not everyone can necessarily purchase ethical fashion. If you are purchasing fast fashion garments that have been simply made, that you have the kind of power to take really good care of them to ensure that they have longevity. This is a project that I'm very excited about. We've been running it for a few years on the trot with a local university, Cape Peninsula University of Technology, where students engage in a 3-week project working in teams across different years of their diploma program, where they use unused textiles that have been donated from retail partners to upcycle and reimagine their design practice, working with what already exists, and then really reimagining how you can create a garment when it's not just meterage coming off of a roll. So this really challenges them to explore textile manipulation and craft techniques, which is some of these images here, is them all working towards making new imagined fabrications. And the groups are also asked to derive a concept inspired by the manifesto and have the opportunity to really immerse themselves in working with upcycling techniques, as I've mentioned, alongside their skills of garment technology and design. All of this culminates in a fashion show, which further ripples as an opportunity for the fashion students as activists to engage with their peers across different faculties about their work and about what they've learned as a result of this 3-week project. It's really incredible. I've really enjoyed participating with them on that over the last few years. And then here I've just got a few little snippets of some of the projects that we've also run. So some of these are teaching mending techniques as well as upcycling, which have been really quite successful. So really just getting hands-on and encouraging people to really get to know their clothes in a personal manner rather than just kind of this sort of secondary engagement with like things that just live in your closet. In terms of fashion activism, the areas that we found to be really successful has been collaborating with community groups and cultural institutions. So partnering with other NGOs and community and activist groups. There are many of them around doing really interesting work. I'll speak about one or two in a future slide, as well as educational institutions. We also found that it's been really beneficial to engage with the industry through events such as within our ecosystem. So at the moment, the World Fair Trade Organization Summit is taking place in Cape Town, and our Fashion Revolution, some of my colleagues are there, and they're engaging and networking and showcasing some of the local design talent that works specifically within the sustainability space. And we've also found it's really important to amplify the work of partner organizations. As we're a nonprofit organization, we know the challenges that they face, so any sort of traction that we can get for people that are doing good work, we find to be really beneficial. And then we also look at hosting lots of events. So I'm going to show you some images because that's far more exciting. So for Fashion Revolution Week this year, we hosted some film screenings and had question and answer sessions so that we could really meet and engage with the public in a way that is not just within the fashion silo. It's quite easy to get stuck within your immediate community where there's already an interest and an understanding of the work that we do. So really push to kind of meet and greet and get to know people outside of that comfort zone. We've also seen that South Africa has really followed the global trend in rising popularity of the second-hand clothing trade. Although we don't see the same sort of impact of this as some other African countries like Ghana, where mass bale imports are really having a complex impact on their local fashion economy, because we have quite stringent import rules. We have seen that secondhand shopping as well as clothing swaps are really quite popular, and we have hosted quite a few of those ourselves. And we've actually noted that the number of garments which are of a really poor fabric quality are showing up in our clothing swaps quite frequently. And rather than kind of sharing those, we will redivert them for textile recycling. We've got some really interesting startup businesses locally that do some really wonderful textile recycling. But this is definitely something that has increased over time. And then this is just an image from an exhibition that we hosted in Durban, which is on the east coast of South Africa, showcasing some really interesting textile products from a designer called Liandra, alongside a film screening of The River Blue, which looks at the impact of textile wastewater on rivers and the textile producing hubs across the globe. And we kind of put this together with some industry specialists speaking about the textile history on the continent to really engage people in different ways depending on their base of interest. The reality that we have come to know is that although everyone who wears clothes in either consciously or unconsciously participates to the conversation around ethical fashion practice, and we really want to encourage everyone to be able to partake in these events and take something away that they maybe did not know before. So in these instances, we have gathered feedback quite informally from public engagements, and I'm going to note some of the slightly more negative ones because it is something that we need to be cognizant of when we are engaging with the public, is that some people feel that our manifesto is perhaps idealistic or too radical to become a reality within the capitalist paradigm. This is particularly so when we're engaging with people that work within the field of economics. My personal sort of take on this is that given our proximity to, or unfortunate propelling towards, crossing planetary boundaries, that radical change is our only option. And we should really explore how we can make quick change. I'm also really happy to know that we still have the creative capacity within the arts, crafts, and fashion areas to think and imagine beyond what is considered the status quo or of kind of profit above all else. And I'm just going to quickly go through these images because I don't want to speak too long. This is just some of our engagements here. The image on the left is some of the Who Made My Clothes posters that we worked towards translating into the 11 South African languages. I'm going to speak about accessibility now, and then one of our upcycling fashion shows. So in terms of our future goals and where we would like to see ourselves in the future and how we can really amplify our manifesto to diverse audiences, is that we would really like to consider accessibility. Like I've mentioned, it's really important for us to think about our local contexts. So we want to further explore the nuanced challenges and opportunities that are specific to the African context, as well as providing our resources across multiple languages to make sure that people can really engage with it quite personally. I think it's quite different when you're engaging with something in a second or perhaps third language, which is quite common in South Africa. And then we really want to build community. We had the opportunity to meet with many of the partners from other global team that are from the continent, and we want to continue to build and strengthen those relationships so that we can share knowledge and experience in order to really make Fashion Revolution as a collective on the African continent a strong pillar within the fashion ecosystem, considering that global population growth is going to be very much on the African continent. We want to be sensitive to what that could mean for our future. And then again, we want to continue to build our community and policy advocacy, specifically within the retail, clothing and textile and footwear sector within the framework of the of our local textile capacity building. And then finally, I would just like to share this really beautiful image from an editorial showcasing the Karoo Winter Wool Festival, which has just taken place here in South Africa, which was featured in Vogue Portugal. And this is really in line with our celebration of craft and heritage on an international stage. We have so much to be proud of, and we really want to share that with the world. And I think that is really what is so exciting about the manifesto, is it really celebrates fashion that is for good. And with that, from me and some of my team members from the continent that are on screen now, I'd like to say thank you very much for your time and for listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Liandra. That was marvelous. Lot of work done and lots to still achieve, but many congratulations. Our next speaker is Saul Marinucci. Saul is our colleague, Carrie's and mine, co-worker, director, and co-founder of League of Artisans. She is a textile designer, cultural manager, researcher, and curator. She promotes and coordinates collaborative practices and exchanges between craft and design practitioners. With a BA in textile design and a master's in anthropology of art, she has strong roots in Latin America, where she has worked with artisan communities for over 20 years. For the British Council's global program on crafting futures, she led the program across Argentina, Bolivia, and South Asia, about which she will be talking. Her expertise lies in research, ethical collaborative practices between artisans and designers, in building visual identities, revitalizing ancestral craft techniques for new generations, and ensuring collaborative processes. Her personal and professional quest encompasses an endless interest in traditions, cultural heritage, collective imaginaries, and the value of the interdisciplinary and the territorial. Over to you, Saul.
Thank you so much, Ritu. I will share my screen. Okay. So I want to start from the beginning so you can understand why this project and also book, Artisans' Voices, is so important for us at League of Artisans, and especially in this context of dialogue and reflection on the power of Manifesto. As talking about Artisans' Voices is to talk about the roots of dignity of the hand, the Manifesto League of Artisans, and the creation of the organization as well, but then Ritu will talk more about it. I will try to be as brief as possible, as this is a research project that comprises more than 4 transformative years, which I had the honor of coordinate as part of Crafting Futures, the global program of the British Council that fosters dialogues at the intersection of craft and other disciplines. This research project involved working with more than 700 artisans from Argentina, Bolivia, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and India to reflect about what ethical practices are necessary for collaboration. The outcome has been research articles, the publication Artisans' Voices, and a documentary. I will share the links in the chat. I think that they are all freely available in English and Spanish. And this book is written by the voices of artisans from the praxis, recognizing master artisans as sources of living wisdom. And in a way, this book tries to build a bridge between praxis and academia. Starting from this premise, in Argentina, together with the British Council and Reddit, a network of 7 design universities and the Craft Revival Trust of India, we began to approach it from this very specific need, how from these efforts of reflection, we could articulate what needed to be said. So since 2019, we started a deep process that consisted of several stages where different dialogues, experiences, territories, craft, as well as the voices of artisans, designers, organizations, curators, anthropologists, educators, and universities were intertwined, and this motivated us to form a polyphonic team to undertake this work. So from this point on, the process of shaping the book begins, focusing on ethical practices, on what good practices are necessary for collaborative work in relation to craft. And this collaborative ecosystem is often a challenging scenario, and it is really necessary to think how we relate to each other. These are the countries involved in the project, which, although it began in Argentina, later expanded to South Asia thanks to the reach of the Global Crafting Futures program. And one of the first actions was to launch an open call with a survey to learn about collaboration experiences, to see what worked and what didn't, and to learn together. Since we were in the pandemic, the first stage was virtual, but we realized that there was a great impossibility, but as many artisans who hold these living forms of knowledge didn't have access to internet, so we decided to gather a group we called Territory Agents, who already had a link with the communities, so they approached the artisans in person to conduct the survey, and so in this hybrid methodology, we collected experiences and were able to visualize and understand what was necessary to contemplate. And this led to the realization of what was most important, what are these practices, which at the same time are universal values, and they were repeated constantly. And the book is an echo of this, and amplifying these voices that speak of respect, of fair treatment. They express it in their own words, in their own languages, which is Salknam Hindi, and when you translate it, they were talking about the same thing. And this is where the first chapter of the book comes from, listening to artisans' voices, focusing on the 7 essential ethical practices. So the first one is respect in a broad sense, referring to ancestral values, not only human respect, but also respect for culture, legacy, and nature, understanding the relationship with the land, animals, and plants. And there is a deep mutual care in which everything is interconnected. Here you will see Margarita's words. I won't read all the quotes, but there are many. I just want to share a few voices so you can have an idea. Then recognition is the second one, not only of skills, but also of cultural identities. It also refers to recognizing the time dedicated to the crafts, here expressed in the words of Celeste Valero. Then consent, the third, consent on everything, where it's about taking photos of them or their work or budgets, like don't assume what the other person might think, but talk about it. Then attribution, given the appropriate authorship or co-authorship so that it is manifested and not appropriated without due credit. And we have here a beautiful quote of Margarita Maldonado, a master weaver from the Selknam culture. And you will read the translation here and you can hear her.
Chinin alien, kanika chini yujat howen, karosetin, chinkilsa alsin, not silkenan wikashin. Dayu Haruen, Shikowa Sholientan, Shikowa Holz, Shikowa Katsuwen, Shikowa Vikishon, Shikowa Wan, Shikowa Tselknan, Chataiken, Na Eleken.
Then you have active listening, that there is an exchange of listening to truly generate an open dialogue and an effective communication. For example, here in the words of Tani, a collective from Uchi Artisans. Then the 6 is share benefits and talks about the balance between giving and receiving, the reciprocity, or aini in Quechua, to think together about what this can each contribute. And the 7 is protection as a practice of preserving knowledge, but also recognizing protection as a refugee, supporting each other when organizing collectively. And it was a decision to focus not on the etymological meaning of each ethical practice or what academia or experts might define, but rather that it be expressed in the voices of the experiences of the making, of the artisans, what it means for each artisan depending on the country they live and the cultural identity they represent. And the second part of the book looks at how these practices interconnect with different topics. So like cultural institutions, this could be in relation to an art gallery, museum, this is like from a Biennale. Then an education, in particular the transmission of knowledge through education, tourism, how craftsmanship is integrated into the tourism circuit. Then technology, where technology, social media, and WhatsApp are including showing how connections and communication begin. And co-creation, showing cases between designers and artisans. And then the third section of the book is communities and knowledge. And since it's a digital online book, it's directly links to contacting the communities and artisans through direct links without intermediaries, so sharing their craft and origins. Then you can click and view more and just connect with each one. And this is what Margarita Ramirez, one of the artisans who participated in the book, said when she received the book. We finished the research and we present it for the first time. I will read it. I feel that we are not alone, and the people of knowledge, as I call it, from schools, universities, they took us into account. I feel that justice was being done because we are also part of this war, those of us who don't study, but who also have knowledge in our souls. I feel that the big stone has been moved and that is starting to roll. And I feel myself, soul, that this quote reflects the bridge I mentioned at the beginning. And this journey, after this journey, we reflect on how knowledge is often associated with theoretical academic knowledge. And this project also highlights the importance of knowledge that comes from the practice, from the experience. So I would like to close with these words in Aymara. Hiwasawalikisna. That means may we complement each other in the best way possible. It is truly a desire to have ethical, sustainable, and beneficial relationships. And it is from this desire that from 2023, we began to shape the dignity of the hand manifesto together with artisans from all over the world. The manifesto as a powerful call to action that demands respect, recognition, careful dialogue for the artisans, and in the voice of the artisans themselves. But now I pass the word to Rito so she can expand on the manifesto and the principles along with Shehnaaj. And on behalf of these voices and names that participate in Artisans Voices projects and book, I want to say thank you.
Thank you, sir. I remember those 4 years so well. Well, I start where Saul has ended, but very briefly. It was a strongly shared belief between us three, Saul, Carrie, and myself, that for far too long, the wisdom of makers, doers, practitioners of the handmade and artisanal, both hereditary and new entrants, had been ignored. And with it, their crucial role in preserving cultural heritage, in developing indigenous sciences, methodologies, and processes, and in addressing contemporary challenges from climate change to overconsumption. and therein lay the genesis of the League of Artisans and the developing of the dignity of the hand and artisan manifesto that sets out 9 ethical principles aimed at securing a more dignified future. Ramat, can you just show us the slides? Thanks. So, next, please. On this slide, you see 3 of the ethical principles. And like I said, there were a total of 9. And we actually globally researched, after the project on Voices of Artisans ended, we globally further researched what needed to come into this manifesto. And this process took us over 8 months in collaboration with and contributions to the document from India, Mexico, El Salvador, Peru, Bolivia, Argentina, Thailand, Egypt, and the UK. And when we were writing, rewriting, drafting, sending it out to all the artisans across, translating it into languages so that we could get their feedback, speaking with them, what emerged was that these were universal values that were held globally. But how the artisans from different areas, traditions, customs, languages responded was differently. So what we did was, and you can see it on our website, we added quotations from different parts of the world, because what they took from each of these ethical principles was something that applied to them. So I'm not going to go over it in detail, but like I said, it was a deeply moving process. And we realized that it is truly a flattened world. I mean, we have barriers and boundaries and territories, but some values hold good across. So this is 3 of them. Can we see the next slide? And you see one of the quotes here, but there were many from other places. Can we see the next one? So I'm not going to read them out to you, but these were heartfelt. Can we see the next? Emma, the next slide. And, when we even showed these quotations to these principles to designers, to other creative people, we were astounded at how they responded to it. So we would be very delighted if you find the time to go over it in more detail, because it would require an hour more of our time and we are running short. Now, Shehnaaj, who is our next speaker, was one such respondent to whom we sent several drafts incorporating changes, her ideas, her thoughts, and she was a really vocal advocate. And she has since then joined the League of Artisans Advisory Board. Shehnaaj Bano is from Khaitun village, Rajasthan. She has been involved with all aspects of her family tradition of weaving the gossamer Kota Doria square check pattern from a young age. Crafted with fine silk and cotton, interspersed with metallic yarns of gold or silver, she supports her family and speaks out for her community. And why I didn't go into detail about the Artisan Manifesto is because I want you all to hear it from Shehnaaj herself. And I'm going to show you some few pictures of her in her village where she works. So this is Shehnaaj. I'm going to ask her questions in Hindi, and then I will translate her answers for you. Shehnaaj, जब आपने बुनाई शुरू की तो इससे क्या-क्या बदलाव आया आपकी जिंदगी में और आपके परिवार की जिंदगी में? आप बता सकते हैं? शहनाज आप म्यूट पे हैं, आपको अनम्यूट, हाँ अब आप ठीक है, अब बोले।
हाँ, पहले केवल मेरे फादर ही केवल इस काम को किया करते थे घर में, मम्मी परिवार संभालती थी, तो काफी दिक्कतों का, कठिनाइयों का सामना करना पड़ता था, केवल एक कमाने वाले के ऊपर पूरा परिवार डिपेंड था। इस वजह से मैंने अपनी 8th क्लास तक अपनी पढ़ाई को किया। उसके बाद मैंने अपने क्राफ्ट को बढ़ाने के लिए इसमें अपने पिताजी के साथ लग के और इसी में अपने आप को बढ़ाया। तो इसमें हमने, जो मेरी बहनें थी, दूसरी भाई था, उन लोगों को हमने सोचा कि अगर मैं अपनी पढ़ाई आगे जारी रखूंगी तो पापा घर परिवार का खर्च उठाएंगे या फिर मुझे पढ़ाएंगे लिखाएंगे, बाकी आगे का परिवार किस तरीके से अपना ग्रोथ आगे कैसे बढ़ पाएगा। तो इसलिए मैं पापा के साथ में मिलकर मैंने अपने इस क्राफ्ट को बढ़ाया और अपने भाई बहनों को पढ़ाया, जिसमें मेरी एक सिस्टर वो टीचर हैं, बच्चों को शिक्षा देती हैं 12 साल से, तो वो शिक्षा के स्तर में बच्चों को आगे बढ़ा रही हैं। मेरा भाई है जो कि इसी क्राफ्ट में जुड़कर कोटा डोरिया में, और वो वीवर्स उसके पास काम करते हैं, आर्टिजन्स 50-60 आर्टिजन्स उसको उन्होंने उसने रोजगार दिया है। तो इस स्तर पर हम लोग आगे बढ़े हैं कि हमारी फैमिली एक खुशहाल फैमिली हो चुकी है। तो हमें मतलब पहले मेरा ऐसा था कि मुझे कोई नहीं जानता था, आज से 20-25 साल पहले, लेकिन ये 17-18 सालों का वक्फा एक ऐसा गुजरा है जिसमें यूट्यूब पर मेरे कुछ वीडियोस भी हैं, और आप और आपके माध्यम से जो मैं आज इन लोग जो हमारे अतिथिगण हैं इनसे मिल पाई हूँ, और मुझे अपने देश में ही नहीं विदेशों में भी जाना जाने लगा है अपने इस शिल्प के कारण। तो मैं बहुत खुश हूँ कि मुझे एक इज्जत मिली है, जहाँ पर पहले महिलाएं पढ़ाई के क्षेत्र में बहुत पीछे हुआ करती थी। हमारे एक छोटे से कस्बे से भी वो बाहर निकलना नहीं चाहती थी, जबकि आज यहाँ पर वो अपने क्राफ्ट के साथ उसमें काम करके अपनी जीविका तो चला ही रही है, साथ में वो उस इनकम से अपने पढ़ाई में उसे खर्च करती हैं और वो शिक्षा के क्षेत्र में आगे बढ़ रही हैं। साथ ही वो दूसरे क्षेत्रों में भी नौकरियां कर रही है, जिससे कि महिलाओं की जिंदगी कुशल हुई है और महिलाओं को मान सम्मान मिला है। जो लोग हमें पहले मतलब वो सोचते थे पता नहीं लड़कियां हैं क्या करेंगी कैसे आगे, तो वो मतलब लोग देख करके एक तरीके से हम पर मतलब वो उनको गर्व होता है कि हमारे केथून की बेटियां आगे बढ़ रही हैं।
Thank you. So I asked Shehnaaj the question that, Shehnaaj, how did your joining your family's hereditary profession of weaving change your life, change your community's life? And she gave me a very interesting answer. She said when she was young, only her father worked. So he was a single, only earning member. Her mother ran the house, and there were herself, the oldest, her brothers and sisters, and it was a very difficult existence. So she stopped studying in the 8th grade because she thought, if my father keeps supporting me through my education, what will happen to the others? And she joined the family tradition of learning to weave, which at that time women did not weave in Khaitun, they did not weave the Kota Doria. So she was one of the few who broke that and started weaving. Since then, with her earnings, she has managed to educate her younger brothers and sisters, because now they're 2 earning members. So her younger sister has become a teacher and is teaching people, whereas her brother has joined in the family profession. She said 17 years back, 17 to 19 years back, nobody knew her. They used to look at all the girls and say, what will they do? I mean, what are girls? They don't really have that much worth. But she said, look at me now. I'm talking to you all here. I have a video made on me. I'm earning a livelihood. There are others I have encouraged, other women I have encouraged. Now people are saying that the girls of Khaitun, which is her village, are worthy. They command and they demand respect. So this is the answer to the first question. अब शहनाज मेरा दूसरा प्रश्न
जी,
ये जो 9 प्रिंसिपल्स हैं ये मैनिफेस्टो के, इनमें से कौन से प्रिंसिपल आपको सबसे अधिक प्रभावित करते हैं?
जी मैम, जैसे कि प्रिंसिपल थोड़ा सा आप मुझे इसका
ये जो 9
Principle-
हमने वो मैनिफेस्टो के पॉइंट्स है ना,
हाँ हाँ
उनमें से कौन से आपको सबसे पसंद है? सब 9 के 9 आपने ही हमें हेल्प करा लिखने में, पर इनमें से
जी
कौन से आपको सबसे अच्छे लगे?
मैम, वैसे तो मुझे सारे ही पॉइंट्स बहुत अच्छे लगे, क्योंकि सारे पॉइंट्स में मतलब जो अपने आर्टिजन्स है, वो किसी भी क्राफ्ट से जुड़े हुए हो,
हम्म,
उन सबकी मतलब हौसले को बहुत बढ़ा रहे हैं ये सारे पॉइंट। और मतलब मेरा ये है कि जैसे कि ये जो पॉइंट आपने इसमें दिया ना, ये बहुत अच्छे पॉइंट्स है। और इसमें जिसमें अपना जो कारीगर है, अपना आर्टिजन से उसकी ग्रोथ हो, वो आगे जो उसके सपने हैं, जो वो अपने क्राफ्ट में बुनता है, वो सिर्फ क्राफ्ट नहीं करता, उसमें अपना शिल्प नहीं बना रहा होता है, बल्कि वो अपने परिवार के लिए और जो इसे पहनेगा उसके लिए वो अपने सपने बुनता है। तो वो सोचता है कि मतलब मैं जिसके लिए मेरे यहाँ काम में क्या होता है मैम, चेक्स बनता है, एक चेक्स जिसको कोटाडोरिया, उसी के ऊपर हमें जीआई मिला हुआ है। तो उस चेक में हम 8 कॉटन और 6 सिल्क के धागे मिलकर के एक चेक बनता है। तो उस चेक में हम उसको खत बोलते हैं। तो मैं मतलब ये कहूंगी कि हम एक खत लिख रहे हैं अपनी बुनाई में, पर पता नहीं ये किसके लिए लिख रहे हैं, पता नहीं कौन ये खत पढ़ेगा जो इसको यूज करेगा, पहनेगा। और यहाँ सिल्वर एंड गोल्ड के धागों से जो इसके ऊपर डिजाइन की जाती है, तो उसमें हम अपनी, और पता नहीं होता कि ये कहानियां है हमारी, किसे हम सुना रहे हैं, ये हम इसकी हम चिंता नहीं करते, बस हम इसमें बुने जा रहे हैं, अपना तन मन धन लगा रहे हैं। और हम चाहते हैं कि जो भी आर्टिजन्स हैं हमारे, तो आगे उनको इज्जत मिले, मान सम्मान मिले, सिर्फ अपने देश में नहीं, विदेश में भी वो एक इंटरनेशनल लेवल पर जाने जाएं। ये मैं इसमें चाहती हूँ, वो एक इंटरनेशनल लेवल पर जाने जाएं। और क्राफ्ट में जो आप सब लोग मिलकर इस तरीके से हम लोगों की मतलब हमें सहयोग करके सीढ़ी दर सीढ़ी हमारी जो मदद कर रहे हैं, जैसे मतलब पारंपरिक रूप से जो ट्रेडिशन ये क्राफ्ट बढ़ता जा रहा है, उस तरीके से आप हमारे ग्रोथ को बढ़ाने में जो मदद कर रहे हैं, ये पॉइंट मुझे बहुत ज्यादा अच्छे लगते हैं।
So I asked her, what did you helped so much with the manifesto. You spread it among your community. You gave us much food for thought in our drafting and redrafting. But what is it that you like the most? And she's given us a very poetic answer. She said, our weaving is in checks. We use 6 silk and 6 cotton threads along with gold. Eight, sorry. Along with gold and silver. And each square is called a khat. Now in Hindi, khat is also a letter. So she said that we are writing these letters to all of you, that while we work, we are putting in our all. And what we want in return, it provides us a livelihood, yes, but what we want is respect. Respect our patrimony, acknowledge our work. And these are the points that we have liked the most. And we want more. We want to go beyond the boundaries of our village. Our product goes beyond the boundaries of our village. It goes everywhere. We don't know where it goes, but we too want to go beyond these boundaries. So that is what she liked, and that is also what her dream is. Thank you, Shehnaaj. बहुत अच्छा लगा सबको जो आपने बोला.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
So this draws us to an end of our webinar, but we have time for some Q&A. And while Liandra and Shehnaaj have told us what they would like to do in the future, the question here is addressed to Sarah. Sarah, what is it that you look forward to in the future? What are the barriers that you're going to cross? What would you like to do?
Is that to me?
Yes.
Oh, it's a big question. I think when I'm thinking about the craftivism work, there's so much potential for people to use the process of craft as a comfort for us personally to grapple with very uncomfortable questions of where am I part of problems of injustice, where am I part of the solutions, but what are the barriers that I am doing, where am I fueling some unhealthy systems. And we all need to do that work. And what I love is that using handicraft helps us feel empowered, calm. It helps with critical thinking. It helps with clarity. And what I often see in the world, which we all do, is we want the easy way out. We want the quick fix, the silver bullets, the nice, easy answer. Is some people use craftivism to not use the comfort of craft for the uncomfortableness of grappling with those big topics on your own or in a group. So what I would love is if people saw their craftivism as quality over quantity and really use the process more to help with that inner work and that inner protest and that education of themselves of where can I be the change I want to see in the world in a way that doesn't burn me out or make me exhausted. I think that's at the moment I'm really pushing the craft for critical thinking element because it's got such potential, and craftivism can make a difference in the world, and I wouldn't do it if it didn't make a positive difference. But I worry, I think, with craftivism that we can use it as an excuse to feel good by doing the making and then create resources that might end up in landfill or use resources that are not ethically made. So my big motivation at the moment is that quality over quantity, and to really challenge ourselves, just protest ourselves just as much as we're protesting others, but in a loving way to ourselves and to others. Does that answer the question?
Yes, beautifully. And thank you. And I wish you all the best. And I hope your path is cleared of all obstacles. And for all of you, I hope you achieve what you all have set out to do. We have no more questions, but we have a comment. As somebody embodying the passions and experience of working with the artisanal and weaving communities, how can I become part of this movement, advocating it further in a professional capacity? I'd love to work with the League of Artisans. I'm from India. How marvelous. Please do. Please write us an email. We would be delighted. There's actually another question too. Can you please expand on what global inheritance looks like and its interpretation? Number 6 in the manifesto. I understand that it is an acknowledgement of generational transmission of skills and knowledge, but I'm trying to understand if global opens the doors to other co-cultures or dominant cultures to feel entitled to this inheritance, much like how regional handicrafts, example, ikat, is sold in the mainstream without crediting this region. Apologies if I have misunderstood global inheritance. Well, thank you for that. Actually, this is the kind of feedback we want, because when we use words, we think we are using them in a particular way. And we should have realized it when we got so many different responses from artisans when they reacted to the ethical principles. What we actually meant when we were talking about global inheritance is that this is the inheritance of mankind. Don't fritter it away. Don't copy, don't cheat, acknowledge, respect. But thank you for that. We are going to look at tweaking the words again. So, well, time has run out, but this has been an amazing webinar. And I think that the thought and work being put in and its dissemination, really, this moving grains of sand by the speakers today and by many others across the globe, is what will bring about the vital change that we all hope to see. And that too, I hope, in our lifetimes, creating a foundation for others to follow. So, in conclusion, a big thanks to supporters and funders for underwriting the webinars and the Leek Textile Week. These include the National Lottery through Arts Council England, and the funding and support from Outside Arts and from Neela House, Lady Bamford Foundation. A huge thanks to all my marvelous panelists for sharing their knowledge and adding to all our learning. I thank to all the attendees for being so marvelous and so attentive, and not one has fallen off, and for responding to the online polls. And a big thanks to my co-directors, the advisory board, and to colleagues. Please keep checking the League of Artisans website, Instagram for the program schedule for the Leek Textile Week and all the links in the comment box to the work being done by everyone on this panel. Thank you very much for being with us. Thank you. So see you all and bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Everybody, take care.
Shehnaaj, thank you. Thank you,
जी
Emma.
मैम
Thank you all.
जी मैम थैंक यू